Hey there, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about something that I have termed rewriting vowels, and in some cases it will be rewriting consonants as well. And as we go through the conversation today, you'll see what I mean by that. Now, I'm sure that many of you have come across issues with your choir insofar as you want the tone to sound a certain way, or you want the placement to be a certain way, or perhaps there are some intonation problems that you think might have to do with the way that the singers are pronouncing something. Well, that's the purpose. All of that is the purpose for why we're going to even consider the idea of rewriting the vowels. Vowels have to be modified. They have to sometimes be changed, and they must be unified in order to create a beautiful sound. What are some other reasons, or perhaps even extensions of those rules, the modified, changed, and unified vowels? Well, consider things like range. Consider things like diphthong and triphthong unification. We'll talk through that a little bit. We also want to talk through elision and how the vowel can impact the success or failure of elision. We also want to talk about desired tone color, and then finally vowel placement. So we're going to go through all of those things together. First, we're going to talk about range. If you have tenors and sopranos in your choirs, especially, this will be impactful to them. You can see in this slide here, I have an example from Ed Henderson's Huron Carol. Really beautiful song for Christmas, beautiful arrangement of that carol if you're interested. He publishes with Cypress, which is a Canadian company. Anyway, there's a part that says, Jesus, your king is born. And the your for the sopranos is up on a high F. And if I were going to say, and I'm not going to sing it in the right octave, but I'm going to give you an example of what I mean. Jesus, your king. Jesus, your king. Do you hear what happens when I put that R in? Well, imagine that on a high F. It's going to be painful. So instead, we're going to sing, Jesus, your king is born. Your king. And I would actually have my singers cross out Y-O-U-R and write in Y-A-W. Why? Because they won't remember. Probably some of the most advanced singers would remember. But for those of us that are working with the y'all comes or the developing choir, and even some of the lazy college students, you're going to need to have them write that in. So what is a diphthong? A diphthong is the combination of two vowel sounds. Joy, out, right? We have in the word joy, we have jo, o, and then we have the E. Joy, joy. And if we don't line those up the right way or at the right time from a vertical standpoint in the choir, what's going to happen is that we're going to have significant intonation issues. We may have what seems like rhythmic issues, and all of that will turn into not a very beautiful sound overall. So what do we do about that? Well, with diphthongs, we're going to do the same thing, triphthongs as well. We're going to just rewrite the vowels. So instead of this example here that I have for you is on the word shout, right? Shout. If you look at the third example down, you can see S-H-A-H-O-O-T, shout. We'll talk a little bit later about how we can actually sing the diphthongs, but for now, we're going to just cross that one off the list. And we're going to stick with either the first or the second example. Paul and Silas began to shout, jail doors, shout, jail doors, or shout, jail doors. We can go with a brighter shout or a darker shout, depending on what tone color you want. Given that this is a spiritual, I would suggest the darker tone would be the one that you would want to go with, but you also don't want your younger singers having to manipulate a sound that's inappropriate for them from a developmental standpoint. Now, within this is really important to remember that after the OU sound, we have a T. T, t. What does your mouth feel like when you sing the T? Is it open or is it closed? Is it a forward consonant or is it in the back? Is it a glide? What is it? Well, in this particular instance, it is a type of applosive because it's t, t, there's air still exploding. The articulators of your teeth or your lips are not closed. T, 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 right? If you close your teeth, it would be hard. So when you close to that T, what automatically happens with the vowel? It also closes. So really, the singers are going to sing both of those vowels, but we're going to pretend like they're not. Paul and Silas began to shout, jail, shout, jail, shout, jail. So as soon as I close to the T, that ooh, a semblance of it is going to come out. So part of the reason we rewrite these vowels is because we want to give emphasis to that first pure vowel sound and let the consonants take care of the second, or in the case of triphthongs, the third. Another example of diphthongs is turning two vowel sounds into one. So that was kind of what I was talking about in the previous slide, but here I've spelled it out a bit more specifically. Go out and joy, go out and joy, go out. And I mean, you're still going to be closing those diphthongs when you go to the next consonant sound. Elision. Now this is where things can start to get kind of crazy because elision is when you are taking the ending sound of one word and you are kind of connecting it, meshing it into the sound to follow. So here we have an example from Stephen Paulus's piece, Sing Creation's Music On. And the text would read, nature's glee is in every. Okay, that's just one little section of it there. Listen again. Nature's glee is in every. So you can hear some of the elision already. For instance, is in ev. Is in ev. So I'm connecting, or I'm eliding the S of is into in. And then similarly, the N of in into the E of ev. Now those elisions are pretty easy because it's consonant to vowel, consonant to vowel. If you go back to the beginning of this phrase, nature's a glee, nature's a glee, you'll see that in order to get a legato sound rather than nature's glee, right? That would do what I call marring the legato, which would in essence close off the air. So in order to allow for that legato to be maintained, we're going to add in a schwa, which in IPA it looks like an upside down E, and it's an sound. And I'm going to connect the preceding vowel sound to that. So it would look like this. Nature's glee is in every. And I could rewrite the text so that it would read exactly how I want the singers to sing this, so that they wouldn't lose that beautiful legato line. That's the main reason, but also going back to this idea of diphthongs and so forth, we want to have that unified vowel sound, that unified vowel color throughout. Strangely enough, the next we go to is tone color. This is an example from Susan Labar's Rise My Soul, and there are a million trillion rises in this song. So this would give you a great chance to work on this particular concept with your singers. So we have the word rise, which is a diphthong, right? Rise, but we also, in looking at this example, you can see that it also is impacted by range for those higher voices in particular. Now, we also, in this, have to make some decisions about elision. Do we want it to be rise, rise, rise? Or do we want it to be rise, 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 right? Or we could have a combination of those two. What you decide will determine the elision and how you'll write out the elision. But in this case, I'm only dealing with tone color in this example, and I have two choices as far as rewriting the vowel in this particular example, in my humble opinion, for now. We can either have a ra or we can have a raw. And I would suggest, well, I'm not even going to suggest it. I pick the rise because I would call it a smile inside my mouth. I like that feeling of excitement growing. And it's hard for me to have that same amount of excitement with raws. But, when the choir is actually in front of you, or I may decide otherwise, who knows? Sometimes it does depend on the choir and who's singing it. So those are some options there, just as an example of how tone color can be impacted by the rewriting of vowels. And we also have the idea of placement. So placement having to do with where the sound is being placed in the different resonating cavities. So we could have it here, we could have it here, we could have it here, we could even have it here. And that might sound re, 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 re. I sound like the old McDonald's song or something. And my dog is even not happy with those sounds. But how they pronounce the vowel will determine where the sound is placed. It can be replaced, or it can be replaced, or it can be replaced, right? So you, as the director, have to decide which one of those you would prefer. Once you have decided, rewrite the sound or rewrite the word in the score so that they'll know how to say it. I oftentimes get on a little bit of a soapbox about the pronunciation of words. So for instance, I would never say that door needs to be replaced. I would never say that door needs to be replaced. I would say that door needs to be replaced. So part of it has to do with emphasis too. It's replaced, not replaced or replaced or replaced. It's replaced. But sometimes when I have singers sing this, like a word like this, where we have a sort of a schwa sound to begin a word, I don't like the sound that it produces when it's placed down there. So that's when I change the spelling of the vowel to be replaced. It still has that unaccented schwa quality to it. It still allows me to sing the articulation like Dr. Giorio has placed in this piece, Broken, which is super fun. You should do it if you haven't. So I'm not taking out any of the musical elements that the composer has placed here, but I am still being true to how I would actually pronounce the word. Another example is angel. And if you know me, you know that I am so aggravated by people singing angel. Nobody says angel. Anyway, I digress. How do I rewrite all this? Well, you can rewrite it the way that I've shown you already, just rewriting the words. But to take a nod from Robert Shaw, who probably was one of the first in this whole idea of how to align vowel sounds in particular, you could actually rewrite the rhythm too. You can actually give, in this case, the schwa rhythmic value. Nature's a glee is in every nature's a glee. And if you write that rhythm out, you'll have there'll be even less of a likelihood that folks will mess it up. Because now you've allowed for an auditory example of it, and you've allowed for a visual representation of it as well. So folks in your choir who maybe that's the modality through which they learn best, you've given it to them. So continuing on in that same idea, I found a few examples of how Shaw rewrote in his own score. So here are some examples. Learn to put our trust. So here, he's actually writing out the diphthongs. If that's the way you want to go, that's great. My suggestion for younger developing choirs is to just get rid of the diphthong sounds. You can put the schwas, you can write those out rhythmically, but if you were to write this out, learn to put our trust, like the chances of those younger singers emphasizing that second sound in the diphthong are a little too high for me. I just don't even want to risk it. And then the next example in the top right corner, you see then the. So here, he doesn't write out the rhythm, but he does put in that schwa sound, that then the. And otherwise, you would have then the. But it doesn't give great articulation or enunciation, rather, to that second word, then the, right? Thereby kind of discounting the word the. And then he gives a similar example in that final clip there, our God. And that would be probably in a section where there's some slowing down. And I know that because of the fermata to fall. And then you can even see that he puts the D on the rest. That's another nod or another idea that's come from Shaw that so many of us use. It's kind of transferred down the lines of choral education, but it's something that certainly works. I found these few quotes from an interview that I read. I'll put that down. I'll link that down in the show notes for you. But one of the things that he said was, I'm crazy about rhythm because they aren't, meaning the singers. And he's working with really fancy singers. So we're not alone in the fact that sometimes we just aren't as, we don't pay as much attention to the rhythms as we should. And then he also said, this is sort of my paraphrase of what he said, but rhythmic clarity leads to textual clarity. So just think about learn to put our trust. So that's very clear. If we were to use my means of dealing with vowels and just rewriting them to get rid of the diphthongs, it would sound more like learn to put our trust, which isn't the greatest. But again, I have pedagogical reasons for why I do that. The other thing that we don't want to forget about, it's not a vowel, but those R's are a pain in the neck. I grew up in Millinocket, Maine, which is a tiny little town in central Maine, and nobody in that community ever put an R anywhere it was supposed to be. And they would take them where they didn't belong. You know, they'd say, not from around here, are ya? Right? So there would be no R's whatsoever. But I had a very good friend, her name was Rebecca, but they called her Rebecca. Here, we're gonna get rid of some of those R's, especially those that fall in the middle of words or in the middle of a phrase, and we're gonna turn them into D's. The first example is from Cézanne's Ave Maria. And so instead of Marie, if they can't roll them or flip them, we're gonna turn them into a D. Maria. Or the next example, for if dreams, right? Dreams. It sounds like I'm rolling my R. And the more your singers practice that, it might actually elicit a rolled R without them meaning to, because the tongue is going through the motion of what it takes to roll. For if dreams die, right? So those are some examples of how you can treat your vowel sounds or rewrite those vowel sounds so that your singers have a greater level of success with how to sing for the purposes of range, diphthong, placement, tone color, and elision. So I hope that helps you as you navigate this thing called choral singing. If you have not already, please subscribe to the channel, like it, and share it so other folks, if this is information that they might find helpful, they would have that at their disposal. Thanks so much.